So this first segment that Pastor Angela and I are going to talk about is on internet safety. And so everything on the internet, as far as like video games, social media, things like that, movies, yes, everything that is a part of any sort of social media, anything like that, internet, we're going to talk about tonight. But each segment's going to be about 20 minutes. So I'm going to start with ours tonight. And I'm just going to kind of jump right into it because I've got a lot of stuff for internet and video games. There's a lot of really terrible things that are going on with them and these companies. And so really they're becoming more aggressive in the content and the things that they're putting out in these games. And this is something that I know personally from mine and Pastor Angela's experience because we both play video games. And so there are things that even that we've played that I'm like, this is like gross.
We've had to stop playing in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like things that we grew up with, they put out new games like that, and it's like.
Yeah, and they take things and just turn it and twist it and make it evil. And so, but we're going to talk about some of the tactics that these companies are using. And so there's one that, a couple months ago, Pastor Chad and I were talking about it because I was just baffled at it. And he came in and asking me if I'd seen something about it. And it's a video game called Cult of the Lambs. And this game, what they do is the way they have it advertised is they take a cartoonized, lamb, and they're part of a satanic cult. And so it shows literally everything. It has Satan and pentagrams and things all throughout this game. It teaches them about sacrificing and all these horrible, horrible things. And if you look at the rating on it, it's only rated T for teen. So it's something that, and I even looked at just because I was curious, looking it up on statistics or reviews on that game. And there's some websites that I went to, and some of these parents were saying, yeah, it's got this stuff in it, but if you're grounded in your faith, it won't shake you. And I'm like, that's not how that works.
You expect that for other video games, but not one that's literally the Cult of the Lamb.
Right, that's literally promoting and teaching these terrible, terrible, terrible dark things. But that's just an example of how these companies are becoming crafty and using these things to enter into our kids' lives. And this is something that can be found on Xbox, it can be found on PlayStation, it can be found on a Nintendo Switch.
Is it on the Game Pass?
No, it is not. So there's so many different ways that they have to incorporate this game and into these kids' lives. And this is just one example. There are thousands of games that I could talk about.
Yeah, more innocent sounding ones.
Right,
too.
more innocent sounding ones.
That one's it's on the nose, it feels like.
Yeah, it is. But there are other things that promote this stuff that have a name of a game that you would just not think of. And I'll get to that here in a second. But the good thing about this game is you have to actually buy it. So your kids, it's not free. It's not like a Fortnite. It's not like a Roblox. It's not one of those games. You would have to actually buy it. So that's one thing that is a plus to it. But it's just super easy for these kids to access these games. I really want to stress that enough. Can't stress that enough that they have access to games that are very similar to this. And I have a video here, Mr. Izzy, that you can play of scrolling through the App Store, and you can see in this video all these different things. These are on at least Apple. They're the top 100 games that I scroll through. And so some of these I don't even go into, but even Among Us and things like that, have things in there that technically really aren't great for children.
And we're not just talking about the content,
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so this one here is a hospital one, teaching them about probably different things and showing things that they don't need to, but it's just as simple as tapping on that app icon, opening it up, and the first thing that pops up are images and videos. This one here talking about self-reflection, and there's another one that is just after this that you'll see that it just promote literally even in the little app icon where it has very, very suggestive images in it. And so you can see that it's just not
And the
not
hospital
fantastic.
one, the hospital one, specifically, what we saw in that one was, it was real life, who's the dad, and just
Yeah.
weird stuff talking about sperm and sperm donors and all this like just worldly crap.
Yes. And so there should be another one that pops up here in a second where, sorry, this video is a little long because it's just all over the App Store. And you can do it, it's on Google Play. I just screen recorded this off of my phone because that's what I had, and so I have a iPhone. But you can see here in a little bit, it should come up with another one.
And the reason why we were so aware of this was we had an incident with my little sister. She was just downloading things for free, and we're like, okay, it's free, it's fine, it's a kid's game. But the issue was like the ads and stuff that were popping up were horrible. Like
Yeah.
the game itself was okay. That game is definitely not okay. It has if you can't read it, it just has like these what kind of Cards Against Humanity kind of questions in it. But it's free, and it markets itself to kids.
So see, this one here is one that, as you can see, just instantly, it just from the app icon, it just has all these terrible, terrible, terrible things.
And it's for 12-year-olds.
You can see right there, and if you can't read it, it says it's for ages 12 and up. And so a lot of your kids are nearing that age range. And obviously, this is not something that I would want my kid to play or look at or have access to, right? And so it's really sickening how Satan has perverted everything and just really reared up his head in this. And so the mobile games are, like we were talking about, several mobile games that just pop up and they're like the number one and all that stuff, and they just die out. But then in the game itself, there are ads. And so there's a couple ads that I'll have Mr. Izzy, you can play. So this game is super simple. The content in the game is not bad at all. But this here is called BitLife, and it's got terrible things on it. And the card reads, "So hot, connect with Adam L. He is so hot." And so it says hook up and date him. And those are options that after you finish this round of this game, this is an ad. This is an example of an ad that pops up. And you can actually interact with that. I felt sick just recording it because I'm like, I don't even want to touch my screen because of it being on there. And so it's just terrible. And that's just one example. There's so many, I have so many other things that I could show you on screen recording for these ads, and they're just innocent. The games itself, the content of the game is fine, but it's because they allow ads in their game that the ad companies are putting things like that in them. And so they're just shoving this stuff down the kid's throat. They're shoving it in their face. They're shoving it in every way, shape, and form. Like when, I'm just going to say for an example, like if you give your child your phone, if there's no real like locks or controls on it, it doesn't take long for them to figure out how to like go and find this game and download it, right? And again, it could be something like that one that I was showing you, that ad that popped up playing that game. That game is fine and innocent, but because of the ads like that, it makes it to where you don't want your kid to play that. And there's even other games that I know that kids play, like a big ones like Roblox maybe, or even Fortnite, that those games are great, but they have updates. And in these updates, they will sometimes add things that are in the game that are very, very terrible.
And they haven't advertised it at first. So like when you look at it, it's fine, but then they add these updates.
Right. Once you go into the game, it promotes these things. And a lot of games, especially around, and these are just some dates for you to be aware of, literally June 1st, even like the end of May leading into June 1st, and even coming out of June into July, be very, very aware, because that whole month, there's just...
It's Pride Month.
It's Pride Month. And so they just shove everything. They do clothes, they do content, they make it where the storyline is now all about this and all about that. And it's just not something that is suitable for these children to be exposed to. And another one is Valentine's Day. They'll kind of do the same thing. They'll incorporate things like that, and they'll incorporate just even other like very terrible, like we saw before with the BitLife thing. They'll incorporate things like that. It's very suggestive content. And so now Fortnite and Roblox, Fortnite's not adding that stuff, but Roblox is. I actually just found an article that in June they were trying to add 17, like age rating of 17 and older content to the game. And I don't have much on like the video of Roblox, but if you've ever watched your kids play it or access it or download it and play it, it's very easy for them to get into one of, they call like a lobby. It's very easy for them to get into a lobby or a server where that stuff is in there. And so this is something that the company is making known, like, hey, yeah, we're gonna make like where you can make clubs and things like that and just do very terrible, terrible things in this game that kids have access to. In Fortnite, one of their things that they're constantly adding is called emotes. And now the emotes themselves are not bad, right? But some of them have music that is tied to that emote that is literally like super aggressive and suggestive, and they do blank out the cuss words, but I mean, you know what they're saying. Like, you know very clearly what word they're trying to say. And it's terrible because these games are supposed to be for these kids. They're supposed to be able to have fun. They're supposed to be able to interact, and they're supposed to be able to actually have fun playing these games. And I'm sure maybe they don't register it at first, but it's these subtle things that are beginning to be introduced in those moments where if they're not aware that it could eventually take over everything and can just ruin their minds, and it can open up doors and gateways into saying, what is this? What was this song? Like, this guy kept doing this emote on Fortnite. What was this song about? And they could begin to research this song. They can begin to have access to these songs. In Roblox, they could be like, what is that guy talking about? Because also within these games like Roblox and Fortnite, they have a chat system. And so you can talk to other people. And this is random. Like, Fortnite's a game where it's one versus, I think, 100 or so people. And all of them are talking. And they could be grown men to a little kid. And every age range, right? And even with Roblox in the chat system, you could be talking to somebody from here in America, or you could be talking to somebody from China, right? But again, the age range is a little kid to a grown adult, or even older than us, and just
We even like heard of someone was talking to us. A friend had watched a docu-series on like the world behind and how people like sex trafficking and everything happens through these very common chats. And this hacker like went behind the scenes and used his gift to actually find these people. The horrible thing is he had a whole stack of names and took it to the government, and no one did anything about it because some of those names were people who worked in the government. And so just people targeting children. And so it's just, that's how important it is. Like we companies, people might say, oh yeah, like there's things in place, but really like no one's really in charge. And the government definitely doesn't have the kids'
no, they don't care
interest
about
at
the kids.
heart
Yeah,
or
no.
safety at heart. So
No.
just, and hear our heart in this too. Like we're not like giving you a list of no, but just helping you identify things. And because this was kind of new to us, and some of the like the apps and stuff, just watching Julia play a game, and all of a sudden this ad comes up with two girls kissing, or one of the girls saying, maybe I should go out with the dad. Like just horrible things just in this innocent game, and that really opened our eyes.
Yes.
So that's why we're talking about it and did all this research, because it
Yes.
really showed us, man, we don't know that much about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I could go on for days and days about all of that, and there was even an article where someone was playing, where someone had put where a child was playing, and they had made a friend on Xbox, and that child had told them, the person that their friend was, their address, and so they had contacted the police, got in contact, found out that guy's name. Turns out he was a registered pedophile, and so he then had the family's address, and so they had to go, and it was just a whole ordeal, right? And so you just never know when it comes to those things who is behind that screen, or what the content maybe necessarily is inside that game. And so I'm gonna now supply you with resources that are going to help you to be more aware of these things. And one of them is, and you can write this down, or if you want to try and remember it, however, but I really heavily encourage you to look up the website focusonthefamily.com. That website is a Christian background, like they talk about Christ and how everything of the world and things like that, and how we can apply it to today's lives. They even do everything from like maybe talks at home, and they go into even like movie ratings. So right now they have a review on the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that just came out, and just letting you know, hey, this is going to be what's in this movie. Here's a heads up, and give you discernment on whether or not you think that that's something that's okay, or if they say that there's really nothing in it or whatever. I don't know. I haven't read that article about it.
I think I remember because I would look up stuff, and they even have like discussion questions like, hey, so they have this in the movie, if you want to talk about it afterwards, after you see it, that kind of thing, like
Right,
why
yeah.
we agree or don't agree with it.
Yeah, and so they have all sorts of things. So I heavily, heavily, heavily encourage you to go in there, because it even had stuff on there about, and this was from years ago. I just scrolled through all the articles, but when Pokemon Go became a big thing, about the safeties and the endangerment that that game caused. There was stuff, I believe, about Fortnite and just online gaming and things like that. So I heavily encourage you to utilize that website. Another one that I know of, talking to Pastor Chad and Pastor Lisa, is called Bark. It's an app, BARK. And it's also, they have phones that they can have that you can order, and it comes with this app on there. It's $14 a month, but what this app does is it kind of helps block some of these things. So they were telling me that little Izzy has a Bark phone, and on this app, that it will stop the ads that, like we saw earlier, from coming up. It won't allow those ads, so he could play those games, because, like I said, those games in and of themselves are fine and good, but the ads are what make them bad. And so those ads will now be blocked. They cannot come up on his phone. Or something is, even if one of his friends sent him like a funny message, but it may be mean or like anything like that, it'll flag the message as bullying, and it'll alert Pastor Chad and Pastor Lisa, right? And so it's a way.
Texting is a big gateway now. Like,
Yeah.
kids can text each other. Like,
Yes.
Julia has a group chat with all her friends at school, and guess what? The drama doesn't stop when she comes home. It just continues and gets worse because no
Yeah.
one understands how to text.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
And it's really great. So that's another one that I encourage you, and you can order your phone from them, or you can download the app on your phone. You have to have it on your phone, and you have to also have it on your child's phone, and then that way you have access to know and say, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to allow them to listen to, like, obviously a lot of the current music, because a lot of it just, they don't care and just say anything and everything, or, I'm not going to let them play these games because of the content that's in it. And I just want to give you a personal experience of my life growing up, because I did not grow up in church. And so personally, I never had I just never had limits. I had a phone when I was 12, 13, with full internet access. I could do whatever I wanted. I had Xbox. I could do whatever I wanted. My parents never monitored anything. They just assumed that everything that I did was good and okay, and it was not. And it was a lot of struggles that I've had to come through from after being a Christian, that I had to realize, like, and there were things that I even still to this day would be like, oh man, I remember watching this when I was a kid, and we watch it and I'm like, maybe we shouldn't watch this movie anymore, because I just grew up not knowing that that wasn't okay, or like maybe in my mind I didn't recognize what was actually happening, but it was implanting things that later on in life I realized, like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Like, why was that in that game? Why was that in that movie? Why was that in that show, right? And so it can be very detrimental and harmful to a child's life if they just have no limits. And thank God that I was able to come through on the other side and realize and recognize that, those things were bad and not good, and able to be set free from these things, because some of them were terrible, terrible things. And so it's very important that you monitor. You don't have to hover. You don't have to like constantly, like, while your kid has their phone out or their Xbox or their Switch, you don't have to constantly be like, okay, but just being aware of some of the things that they may have access to.
So I'm not going to take too long. I just wanted to kind of share, because we are kind of a contrasting couple. Like, we grew up very differently. And so you guys, being parents in the church, raising your children in the church is amazing and wonderful. And I can attest to that, because I have no qualms with my childhood. I really don't. And I'm not saying like, oh, look at my, but I'm really thankful to my parents who raised me in church, who grew up, who were strict, but not incredibly. Like I was talking to you guys earlier, some of their decisions were kind of crazy, like letting me do stuff or whatever on my own and stuff like that. But they were fairly strict with me, especially on TV and internet and everything. And so just want to share some insight, like some experience I had growing up. And what we're saying isn't, I don't think it's black and white. I think everyone has, it's led by the Spirit. The gateways of things. I think that the things that you probably dealt with in your past and things that you look for in your kids. But I'm going to just share some insight. And also I know anyways. Okay, so one thing is I feel like when we were going over this, I'm like, oh my goodness, thinking about our future children, I'm like, I just want to lock them in a cell and be done with it, and it'd be fine. But then I was thinking, one day they're going to be independent, they're going to make their own decisions, and they'll, if we leave them like that, they're going to be curious and want to do all the things that we didn't let them do. And like I was thinking, no matter how strict we are, how well we monitor our kids, there's still one TV advertisement, one billboard, one trip to Walmart away from being exposed to the sin of the world. Like, there's no way to completely shut them out. And so one thing that I remember as a kid, I'll share this experience with you, just to kind of give, I don't know, a way that my parents had always dealt with this for me, and I really am thankful for it now. But one way to show is I was exposed to porn at 11. At 11, and that's with my parents being very strict with me. I only had 1 hour of internet in the day. They always were there. We had one room house at the time. Like, they were always present, They just were uneducated, for one, on the internet, like what was out there and how fast you could access this stuff, especially for kids. It's horrible, but porn is very close advertised to kids-related things. Puppy love. Like, you think of all the words. That's going to spark a porn site, 100%. And that's what happened to me. I looked up, I heard these kids were playing a game online. Then it was mostly online games. We didn't have, I wasn't allowed to have a lot of PlayStations or anything. But I looked up, it was like puppy lemonade stand game. And lo and behold, what pops up before me just horrified me. It was like a porn site, and it was terrible. And like to this day, I can still I remember it, and it was horrible. And I quickly I X'd out of it, and I was done, and I was like, But I think one thing that, and thankfully, it didn't become a stronghold in my life, nothing. But I think one big part of it was, one, God's grace, and two, my parents were very open, and I always could trust talking to them. No topic was really off limits. Like, we could talk about anything. It wasn't like, oh no, I heard about this, I'm just gonna keep it to myself because it's nasty and they're gonna think I'm terrible or whatever. Or maybe I think they don't care, so I can just know about it or see it and it's fine and deal with my own personal guilt or shame or whatever. But we had something like that had popped up before, and my parents had addressed it. Maybe it was in a movie, I can't remember, but I do remember them saying this is bad because of this, or but mostly they would talk about my relationship in relationship to my relationship with Jesus. So they wouldn't always just say this is bad, so just don't. But they always were very big on communicating why. And why it's so detrimental to our relationship with Jesus. And from the very beginning, I had it drilled into me that a relationship with Jesus is everything. And so coming from that place, seeing that porn site, seeing whatever, would always trigger that thought. It would always trail me back to Jesus. Oh, no. Jesus wouldn't want me to do this. I can't make Jesus sad. That was my thought. That was what they put in me, is if I make something that makes Jesus sad, I don't want to do that. I don't. And so another big thing I realized as I was thinking back on it, everything too was we did everything together. And I like to call it we traveled every gateway together, just about. Like, not every single one. But, like, we talk about gateways, like movies are a gateway, music is a gateway. We did a lot of it. I mean, we went to school, but when we were together, we watched just about every movie together. Nowadays, I feel like everyone's in their separate rooms doing their own thing, and that could be a hard time because how do you help, like, bring something to attention, or talk about something that we don't agree with when they're in the other room and you don't even know what they're watching? When we were together, we would watch things and, we'd watch old movies like the 90s, the 80s. There's always something in a PG movie in the 90s or the 80s that comes up, and we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And so there was a lot of times where my parents, watch their favorite TV and be like, what? What was that? And, I don't remember that. And so we'd pause it, and we'd talk about it. Okay, so why is that not good? Like, it's not good because of this, because, obviously this is not how we live as Christians. And so it wasn't this indoctrination, like I'm in the room by myself watching this TV, like taking all this in and saying, oh, they accept it, so I can accept it. No, it was, no, we don't watch this. We don't accept this because of this. And so through that, it wasn't like they were shielding me. Like, we still watched 80s movies, 90s movies, and they still took a chance. It wasn't like we're just watching VeggieTales all the time. But we were watching it together, and I think that is, like, the key thing that I remember, because I don't feel like we do that anymore as a family structure, and it's fine. It's not like, horrible people or horrible parents. That's just how the family structure is now. But I think that was a big factor that I feel like we really need to bring back into our family structure, is doing just about everything together. And if we're not, go outside, go draw, whatever, but we're not accessing this gateway without me taking it's like telling a kid, hey, you can go down that scary hall with all the lurking monsters, that gateway, you can go down it by yourself and fend for yourself. We wouldn't do that. We would not let our kids fight a monster or happen upon a monster unprepared or without our protection. We wouldn't. It's the same way with movies, music, video games. Even, like, my parents would play video games with me. They didn't even like video games, I remember, but they wanted to do it with me because they wanted to make sure, at least the first time, making sure with me that we were all good, that this was good, and so in that I could be aware of things maybe that they don't agree with, and so that's just my little experience that I had growing up. And I think, like I said, I don't want us to, like, there's already so much responsibility and I know Pastor Lisa are going to be talking about more on it, but I just, I know it's so quick for us to get overwhelmed by everything that's out there, and in the end, it's God's in control. But I feel like one thing for us, I think, to always keep in mind, what we might have accepted or what our parents might have accepted for us when we were younger might not be good now. Like, we raised in non-Christian homes. Like, some of those things might not be good now. Or just thinking about, sorry, I'm trying to find my notes.
Well, I mean, anything is, a lot of content now is just even in kids. Like, a lot of Disney movies now are including things that are not supposed to be in a kid's movie.
Yes.
Lightyear, I love Buzz Lightyear, but the movie Lightyear has a very strong point on something that is not appropriate for kids, but it's in the movie. And it made me so mad. And I'm like, I don't understand why these beloved companies like Disney, that when I was growing up, we watched Lion King. Yeah, Lion King showed Mufasa dying, and that was pretty tragic. But it wasn't like, I mean,
Traumatic.
that just helps you, like, teach the kids, like, okay, there might be loss in your life eventually, and, maybe how to cope with it or something. But it wasn't something that was completely inappropriate. It was something that was like a real life situation,
Yeah, and what I basically just wanted to end with was, God's in control, obviously. What we can control, though, obviously. We want to be wise, like it says in the Bible. Like, we want to be wise like snakes, innocent as doves. And, we grew up in a different era growing up, internet, like, even for me, like, there's so many, like, different things, like apps. I didn't have apps growing up. I had internet games. and websites that I would go to. And so, I mean, I was having to learn all of this stuff. So just being educated is what we'd end with. Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to have Pastor Chad and Pastor Lisa come up, and they're going to talk about more of the biblical leadership within the home.
Everybody good? Need to stand up and stretch? My kid's texting me. He can wait. That was a lot of information, a lot of good information.
Really good. Yeah.
Let me start off with this, and Pastor Angela kind of hit on it. It can be overwhelming trying to do what you feel is right. It can be annoying, but don't let the extra work be the reason that we allow our kids to fall into things. Because like little Izzy has a bark phone, and my phone goes off all day long, and it's just music that he's listening to, and it's Christian music, but because they're talking about their testimonies on drugs and things like that, then it's like, and so but I have to do the due diligence of checking it out. Now some of it I know who the artists are and things like that, but the first time I saw bullying, and it was him and one of the kid, AJ, somebody were playing pool online. And they're like loser because they lost, and it says bullying. But I had to do the due diligence of checking it out to make sure, that things. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, it's annoying. My phone is constantly going off because of things. Pastor Travis was trying to put his contact info in Izzy's phone, and I had to approve it before it could even go through. So those things are annoying, and they take work, but it's so worth knowing that you've done everything that you can do. And Pastor Angela said it, there's always going to be a way for our kids to have an opportunity to be exposed to something.
Right.
And we just have to trust. One thing God told us when Kendra left home is, I love her more than you do. Like, she's my child. I've loaned her to you.
Yeah.
I love her more than you do. And so I have to trust that we've done what God's asked us to do, and to the best of our abilities. And from that point on, we just have to trust God. So don't get overwhelmed in trying that. There's nothing wrong with putting your foot down. Don't let the manipulation of a child, make you back off because you don't want to deal with the fight or the hassle, because in the end it's worth that. And we're going to move on with that, and it does tie into some of what we're talking about. But we're going to talk about our role as parents in God's eyes, or biblical leadership in the home. And I encourage you to take notes in this so you can go back in and say, not because it's profound or whatever, but because it's our job as parents, as human beings, to be in line as much as we possibly can with what God has for us. So I want to start off with this question. What is your vision for your family? We find it easy to find vision for ourselves, find vision for our businesses, for our jobs, for our goals in life. But a lot of time, ministry, whatever it is, but a lot of times we neglect the most important thing that God's given us responsibility over, and it's our families. God's intention and number one thing to advance the kingdom of God is through family. It's from the beginning, and so that's important. Habakkuk 2:2 says, "Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it." And it's important for us to have a vision for our family, because it is the foundation of everything we do. When our kids ask why can't we do this? This is why. This is what God's called our family to. Not what God's called mom and dad or parent or brother or sister, but as a whole. God has called your family to something, and it's important that we do that. Why is it important that we have a vision? Again, it's the foundation for us to build on and to lean on. It's also the thing that we reference back to when we get off track. once we've learned to do, hold on, one thing we've learned to do when we feel stuck, or we've failed in an area, or we've been lenient on our kids and they may have taken advantage of that or whatever, is we reference back to, this is what God said. Because again, I the reason I just told you, hey, don't let the weariness of the extra work be a reason that you allow your kid to slip up, is because it happens. It happens to us. Oh, well, I'm not going to check that tonight. I'll let them stay on a little bit later, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, and then it comes back and it bites us, and I'm like, man, I should have took the extra 15 minutes to do that. Or even neglecting conversation because you don't want the buck or the tension from the kid, right? So one thing we've learned is when we feel like we're stuck or when we've got off track, we go back to what God's already spoken. That can apply for your life too, just you individually, but we're talking as a whole. Go back to the last thing God said to you. God, I don't feel like our family is growing closer. I feel like my kids are getting wilder. I feel like I'm having more and more, issues or whatever. And it's not always something that we've done, but revisit that and then re-implement it. Hey, this is what God said. A vision for our family can also be used as a reminder to your kids when they begin to question their purpose or begin to live and act in ways that don't line up with what God has spoken over their lives. It's okay for us to remind our kids who God's called them to be. It's our job. It's what God's given us, our responsibility to say, hey, that's not who you are. When you were born, God, and one thing we're careful to do, especially being in ministry, I've been careful to tell my kids, hey, you're called to ministry. I want them to find, we don't tell them that. I want them to find out that. Now we know, but I want them to find out. And some of them I found out from God speaking directly to them. Some of them have been given prophetic words over lives, and then when they come to us and say something, or we hear that, then we say, hey, we've known this, so now we're going to partner with you in this and remind you when you start acting different than what this word says, we're going to remind you of who God has called you to be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of times they've received words themselves, and they'll come to us and say, hey, we know we're called to this. Like Kendra, when growing up, she knew she was called to music ministry, and we never really said that to her, but she made it a point to make it known. And so then we had the leeway to say, okay, since that's what you're called to, that now we have the accountability there, and so we can hold you accountable to what you feel like you're called to do. Sorry, that's really loud. But now we can hold you accountable. And so then as she grew and she started to say, say things that were off of what God had told her, and, she was trying to make things work that weren't supposed to be working. Like she had this idea, I'm going to go to, what college was it that she was talking about going to? Anyways, it was like, I'm going to be a radio person and like talking on the radio, like a DJ or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of like what you were called to do, but not really, And then later she, came back and said, no, I'm called to ministry, and so then, but it was like us, holding her accountable for those kind of things. But
And not that couldn't be a ministry, but that's
Right.
not what God spoke to her.
Right.
Our daughter Kim, we've known for the longest time that she's called to missions. And she knew that. She when she was younger, she was a prayer warrior. She has a heart for people. Like even recently, just coming back to the Lord, she was scheduled to be in a wedding with two girls that were getting married. And when she got saved, we were on FaceTime. She goes, "I can't be a part of that, can I?"
yeah.
And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And she knew, and she goes, "Well, how do I do? I don't want them to think that I
don't love them.
I don't love them, but having to have that conversation almost killed her, because she was like, I don't I don't want to. I don't want to push anybody away. I don't want to. So we knew that she was called to missions. We didn't know what that looked like, and that's one thing as parents that we have to be careful not to try to put our own thoughts of what that looks like on them. Let God speak to them, and then we guide them along in that. If we constantly are telling them what God has called them to do, then they'll never listen to God for themselves. They'll always listen to mom or dad, or they won't listen to anybody, and they'll go the complete opposite way.
Right.
So we're careful to guide them in what that Izzy chose himself to go to the ramp. We never even mentioned the ramp. We never mentioned he was going to go to the river. We never mentioned that. That was things that he did. And one, I guess it was during prayer one night, he came up and he said, I feel called to kids ministry. That's what he said. And then later he's like, well, I don't know if it's kids ministry, but I know I'm called to ministry. And we're like, hey, that's cool. You go figure that out. Whatever you need to do to figure that out. So we're just very careful in that, and it's kind of off what I was on, but just knowing that support your kids and what they feel God has called them to do, but let them hear from God as well, and you just kind of steer them along. How do we get a vision for our family? It's very simple. We pray and ask God. We spend time with God. Just like we pray, hey, God, what is your purpose for my life? Hey, God, what is your vision? What is your plan for my family? Because, yes, each individual person, we're going to talk about this in a minute, has a plan for their individual lives, but God has also called your family to something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about back in 2013 when God called our family into full-time ministry. He wasn't just calling me and Chad into full-time ministry to go be youth pastors, but because we had a family of children it affected the whole family. So it was finding, okay, so what does that look like for our family that we're called into ministry? So now we're not just called into our ministry, but we're called into the family ministry, and that was then, trying to find out, what their part in that was. How do we find out what is their part now that God is calling our family into ministry? And so finding their individual gifts and talents and abilities, and how that all works together. How can we include them? Because we don't want them to feel excluded. They're already having to uproot, right? Everything that they know. We're having to move states and all this stuff a million times. And so having them involved in what we're doing helps that process, because we're like, okay, we're called as a family to preach the gospel to the world, and to go into all the world and preach the gospel wherever God sends us. That's where we're going to go. And so in that, what part do you play in that? What abilities do you have? What giftings do you have to help preach the gospel,
Yeah, one thing that I've seen just from being in ministry, when parents separate ministry and family, meaning excluding their kids from what God's called them to do, that calls for disaster. Yep. It really does, because they feel like they're competing with ministry. Now there is a time of, my parents were great with not mixing church business and home. Like, I didn't hear them talk about things at home. They were very good at separating that. Thank God, because I know so many friends that their parents have been in ministry, and their parents chose to talk about those things around the kids, and they developed this hardness towards God, when really it wasn't God that did it, it was people. Pastor says a long time, we'd have a great church if it weren't for people, right? He said his dad used to say it all the time. He's like, well, how does that make sense? You need people to have a church, but he got it. We're all difficult to deal with. We all are. You know what I mean? And so it's important to, whatever God's called you and your family to do, that you include your kids in. Lauren and BJ, when we were in Newport Richie, man, their kids just jumped in. They were and you hear, go see what Pastor Chad needs. Go see what Pastor Travis needs. But you know what? They felt a part of that, and they took ownership. And a week or two in, we didn't have to ask them to do. They knew what went where and how, and they were putting stuff together, and they knew when it was tear down time where things went. And hey, this doesn't go in there. This goes in this car. And you know what I mean? They took ownership of that. Why? Because they were included in what God had called their family to do and be a part of. The next thing is, how do we steward the vision God has given us for our family? You want to talk
Just one of the things is, number one, stewarding our individual personal walk with God. Obviously, we're models for our children. So if we're not stewarding our own walk with God, how are they going to steward their walk with God, right? They're going to do exactly what they see us doing. It's the same thing with how you respond in certain situations. If you respond in rage or whatever, your kids are going to respond in rage or whatever, right? But it's the same thing with the walk with God. Number one is the main thing is having your personal walk with God secure, so that they can follow that.
Yeah. Let your kids see you pursuing God. When we lived in Daytona, we had our house was all tile, so it echoed really bad. And Kendra would be like, yeah, 4:30 in the morning, and Dad wakes me up because he's in the living room praying. Right. And then she's like, but it brought comfort to me. Right. You know what I mean? They know, I remember hearing my mom and Dad in their room at night after we went to bed, and Dad had been at college all day, and then he worked 2 jobs. Sometimes they've been at the ball field with me, taking me everywhere I needed to go. They were tired, they were wore down, but I heard them in their rooms at night praying and pursuing after God.
Right. I mean, our kids, like when we're having our time and we have, a service going on TV or worship going on the television, and they'll see us. They'll be playing video games in their room, but they see us out in the living room, praying or worshiping or whatever, and so that's modeling for them what they can do. You know what I mean?
The next thing is family devotion and prayer time together. Let me say this. We like to quote Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That doesn't mean just bringing them to church. Because reality is, it's not Pastor Travis's job to teach your child how to pray and study the Bible and pursue God. It's his job to partner with what you're teaching them at home. So family devotion time is important. That could look different for every family. We've tried everything in the world, and can I be honest with you? We fail at this often. Being consistent, sticking with it. And we're like, man, we really have to get back to this. But we found that sitting down at dinner while we're all there before we get up, having that then. And just some things, I'm going to give you some practical things that we've done, and I think this one has worked the best for our boys. But being on a reading plan, or reading things together, like, hey, today we're going to read this or these 3 chapters, and we're going to come together and talk about them tonight. And so they're not just hearing us read to them; they're learning to read the Bible. And I don't understand this. Okay, well, here's you some tools to look up, and that way you can understand. Kim just texted Lisa the other day, and she goes, I was reading my Bible, and I started using the Blue Letter Bible app. Well, we taught them that at a younger age. We didn't even know she remembered that. But she knew that she was having trouble understanding things, and she's like, oh, yeah, Mom and Dad told me about this resource that I could go and look up. Blue Letter Bible Hub is great. Yeah. Things like that. But with the boys, we would all read the same thing and then come together, and I asked them, okay, give me 3 things from each chapter that you've read that spoke to you. Or it could be just something funny. It could be a question that you have. Reading through, was it Genesis and Exodus and all the weird family stuff that went on? Like, they were like, what in the world is going on with this right here?
Wasn't that their sister?
Yeah, and things like that. But, but then they would have some good things. And, sometimes things like, wow, I never even thought about that. One thing we would do with the kids when the girls were younger is we would spend some time in prayer and ask them, what did God speak to you tonight? Learning to listen. And sometimes I really didn't hear anything. But then we start asking more questions, and they're like, well, so they did hear. They just wasn't the way they thought that they were going to. They thought, I didn't hear somebody speak to me.
It was just a thought that popped in my head.
And teaching them, one way that we taught our kids, to hear from God is, well, I don't know if it was just my thought. Well, yeah, most of the time when you hear from God, it is a thought or a phrase or something like that, and it's your thought. Why? Because God put that thought in you. Mm-hmm. It's not this mysterious thing. It's as simple God knows how He creates you, and He speaks to you through the way He created you. It could be art. It could be, different things like that. So just taking that time nightly, daily, to read and pray together. Another thing, pray with your kids before they. Can I tell you this? My kid, Izzy's 14, Big Izzy's 18, and they still come in our room at night and say, "Hey, will you pray with me?" Every night.
I love it.
It is, it's amazing. And the girls were the same way. Hey, will you? They could be mad at us, but they wanted us to pray with them before they went to bed at night, and that's something that we instilled. And so, what you're doing is being effective. Can I say that? Those seeds are growing; they're taking root, and they may have a wall up. They may act like they're not interested. But God's word does not return void.
Yes.
So take hold and have faith in what you're doing.
And I just want to say, don't get discouraged if they're not acting the way you think they should act right now. Okay? You just be consistent at what you're doing and raising them and training them up in the way they should go. And when they are old and when they come back to it, because eventually the thing is they have to learn who God is for themselves eventually. When they leave the house, they may go down a road. They might. Who knows? Because, the enemy's just like that sometimes. And we've had to go through 2 children like that, where they had to learn who God was for themselves, that it's no longer just mom and dad's God. Now it's, okay, who is God for me? And so your job right now, while they are in the home, your job is to train them up in the way they should go. Train them up in the Lord. And then as God is the author and the finisher of everyone's faith, just like He was the author and finisher of your faith, you have to trust that He's going to show Him to them, down the road, whatever that looks like, however many days or years it takes. Hopefully it doesn't take years, but if it does, we're just like Kendra, when she moved out, she went through a 6-month little deal, right, where she had to find out for herself. Well, Kim's taken 3.5 years, and so every child's different and everybody's different. But the main thing is that you be consistent now in what you're doing. Do not give up. Do not throw in the towel. Keep doing what you're doing, even when it's like consuming, like you feel like you're overwhelmed because you don't feel like it's getting through. It doesn't matter. It is getting through. Don't let anybody tell you it's not getting through. Even if it doesn't look like it's getting through, it is.
Yeah, we had a conversation with Izzy today. He was packing up stuff for college, and Lisa's like, my boy's moving out. And we're like, thank God that for this time, it's a happy thing. We're not crying, worried. And can I be honest with you? We didn't think, there was times where we didn't think it was going to look like it looks now.
Out of all the children.
But the seed took root. The seed took root. Our consistency took root in him. Yes. And God did what He said He would do. You know, so don't lose hope in that. The next way that we can steward is with discipline. Mm-hmm. Now, every child takes discipline a different way. Like, little Izzy, the threat of spanking him would terrify him. Big Izzy, nope. You could beat the mess out of him, and it just make him mad. And it went, you know what I mean? And so different things. Kim, you'd just
barely raise your
voice, and she's, whatever. Yeah. But the main thing is being consistent in how you discipline your kids.
Right.
Hold on to your word. Don't let them. Now there's grace. We practice grace, but we also have to teach consequences. Because reality is, in life, there are consequences. Mm-hmm. And yes, God will save and forgive, but in earth, there are still consequences that we have to deal with for our mistakes. So it's important that the main thing is that you do it out of love and consistency.
Yeah. Proverbs 13:24. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. That is a strong word. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. So many times a lot of parents, they don't want to deal with the stuff. They want to be a friend to their kids. And yes, it's important that you teach them that you're someone that they can come to, but it's also important to discipline. Discipline is very important, and it teaches, I mean, eventually God, they're going to have to learn how to listen to the Lord and obey the Lord. That's what your job is right now, is to teach them how to obey, so that when God begins to teach them things, that they are able to listen to God and to obey God, because that's ultimately where it's leading.
Yeah, and so after we find out what God's vision is for our family, and we begin to walk in these things of stewarding what God's called your family to do together, we said this, but figure out what each individual family member may be able to contribute to the overall vision of your family. Another thing is get them in a place where they can serve. Serve at home, serve in the church, serve in the community. Find their abilities, find their giftings, find the things that God has given them to, and sow into your kids.
Yeah, what are they interested in? If maybe they're interested in helping people, right? Then we're giving them opportunities. How can we help people? If it's music, they have a gifting and a talent for music. Maybe you need to sow into that. Maybe get them a lesson, lessons for whatever instrument, or vocal lessons, or whatever it is, just things that can sow into the vision that you see the purpose that they have,
Yeah, and the most important thing is don't let this be overwhelming. Sometimes God's call, God's vision, if we try to take it on with our own power, it can be overwhelming. It can wear us down. Include God in everything that you do. And when your children see that He's included, that you don't take a step without including Him. If whether it's deciding a school that they're going to go to, or whatever it may be, when they get older, relationships, things like that, friends, instead of saying you can't be friends with this person, okay, why don't you pray and ask God whether this should be a friendship or not? You know what I mean? Including God in everything. Because if they see that it's not just talk from your mouth, but it's action that you walk every day, then they will follow you. So I just want to encourage you guys, don't get weary, don't be frustrated. Find what God's called your family to do and pursue it with everything that you have.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just want to take a couple of minutes here and just share. I want to just share with you for a few minutes about, I guess, basically understanding our kids and where they are and where they're coming from. And it's amazing that a lot of that has to do with where we are as parents and how we're perceiving our life and how we're perceiving their life. But in Psalms chapter, I believe it's 127, it says that children are a gift from the Lord, and it not only says they're a gift from the Lord, but they're also a reward for Him. So always remember that your child is a gift from God, and God does not give bad gifts. All right, so it's just important that we remember that. And we know I did just write down just a few scriptures. Well, I mean, I didn't write them down, but I have them here. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it, right? We heard that one already. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Sometimes we kind of take that verse and we don't put it together like it was intended, and we say don't provoke your children to anger, right? And so often I've heard that said that, quit aggravating them, you're making them mad, and the Bible says don't provoke them to anger, but it says rather bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. This verse is simply saying that if you do not bring them up in the instruction and the discipline in the Lord, then you are provoking them to anger. It's not a poke them and getting on their nerves and making them act some way. It's literally how we are raising our children and the things that we pour into them. So just remember that, Ephesians 6:4. And then Proverbs 29:17 says, discipline your child and they will give you peace of mind, and will make your heart glad. So there's a few things. So talking about understanding our kids, first of all, let me say this. Remember, they have feelings, right? Remember, they have feelings. Remember that they have stress as well. They don't have the same kind of stress that you have, but guess what? They're not you, and they're kids, so they have kids stress. To adults, kids stress doesn't seem like very much. That's because we're adults. But when you're a kid, the stress that they feel are the same stresses that you feel in the same ways. It weighs heavy on them, and so understand that, and remembering, excuse me, that they have feelings. I had someone come in, and we were talking about a freshman in high school, and I was a youth pastor, and parents came in and they brought their daughter with them, and they said, "Can you please tell our daughter that she does not know what love is, that this is just puppy love, and that she needs to get over this." And I mean, they were just going on like so many parents do. And I remember the parents got mad at me, but later apologized because they didn't feel like I took their side. And I looked at both the mom and dad sitting in the office, and I said, "You guys have to understand. I understand that it's puppy love, but when you're a puppy, it's the real thing. And so you have to handle that differently. They're going to reject everything that you say to them that tells them that they don't understand, that they don't this, and they may not understand. But we understand because we're older. We understand that maybe what you're feeling isn't the real deal. And but how do we communicate with that with them, that in remembering that they have feelings? I'm not saying tiptoe around everything and all of that, but I'm saying in our everyday world and everyday life to make sure that we have that understanding and communication with them. This has been said already, but take time to explain things. I know a parent that I know very, very well, and they explain too much. They explain too much. I had a little boy tell me one time, says, "Well, I can't watch this, this cartoon because," and they told me every reason why. And I went back to the mom and dad and said, "Let them watch it. They already know everything. Who told them all of this? At 5 years old, she likes a girl, and so I'm not allowed to watch it, and they were kissing, and so I can't watch it." And I'm like, what are you doing, right? Sometimes it's too much, but explain things. Explain things like why are you in trouble, right? Why am I proud of you? I'm proud of you. Okay, great, I'm proud of you. Some kids don't even know what that means. They just know it's not bad because you're not yelling when you tell them that. And but explain things to them and understand that even though they're little people, they're still little people. And in everything that we're doing, we are training them and we are raising them up. And so it's very, very important. I will say this, that of everybody else on the planet, what is there, like 6 billion people on the planet now? For your children, you are their role model. No matter what they tell you, you are their role model. You are. You ready for this? You are the fixer, right? You are the helper. You're the advisor. You're the accountant. Bless the Lord. You're the disciplinarian. You are their hero. Even when they say, "I hate you," you are still their hero. You are still the role model. And out of everything in life, I think we can agree that the most important thing that we are modeling before them is our spiritual walk with God. Because as the Bible says, if you seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, all of these other things will be added unto you. I believe that in that, if we live our life first for God and the things that God desires through his word to teach us and to show us and giving us instructions on how to live, then the rest of our life kind of falls into place because we've got the one thing that needs to be in order first in order, and everything in our life can't help but line up when we walk in submissiveness to the Lord. And so understand that as we are leading and guiding and remembering who our little people are, and understanding that they are learning everything. and they learn by what we do more so than by what we say. And so understand that's you. Because when you tell them you love them, when you show them affection with a hug and a kiss on the cheek or any of those things, can I just say that there's nothing wrong with that? I have been around people. I have been in places with my 3 boys, with other people, with other guys and their sons are the same age as mine, and like mine are now like 32, 30. I'm just old. And when they go to leave, they're like, "See you later, Dad. Love you." And my boys right now, y'all are gonna laugh at this. Them big old ugly boys will hug my neck and kiss me on the cheek every time. Every time I leave them, every time. That's just, why do they do that? Because that's what we've done our entire life. Nobody in this world will ever love, I don't care who you get married to. They will never love you as much as me and your mama love you. And it wasn't just what we would say, but it was what we would do, right? Because we understood that in the development of who they are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some spiritual things in a moment, but just the physical, the natural, and the understanding of who they are, their identity is going to come is so much, and what they'll learn will come from how we respond, not how we react. I mean, they will if we react, but if we respond, and how we love, and how we nurture, and how we make ourselves to be available and to be understanding, and to be someone who will hear them, right? So spending time with them is important. I believe that in everything that we are teaching them, that what it is to be a true man or woman of God, right? We're Christian people. We're Christian parents. We want to raise Christian children. And so everything that we're teaching them how to be and I would say it this way, a proper man or woman of God. Not a perfect one, but in that they see, how many of us have ever had to go to our kids and say, "I need you to forgive me"? I've had to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've had to do that. I've had to do that because they made me mad, and I didn't respond well. I reacted terribly, and because I reacted later, when I finally calmed down, I'm like, you know what? I should have never done that. And I've had to sit in front of my children before with tears in my eyes, asking them to forgive me, and just telling them that this is not, I'm sorry, you should have never ever seen me do that. I should have never gotten angry like that. I should have never. And I'm not talking about doing anything horrible. I'm just talking about letting them see their dad or their mom in a light that is not reflecting the love of Christ. And it's important because it's developing who they are. And not only will they take on not only will they look like you eventually, not only will they say the same things that you say, not only will they act the same way that you act, but their lives are being molded by the things that you do, even so much greater than just the things that you speak. Again, some of this, you guys touched on this, right? You guys touched on the dangers of so many things out there. You guys touched on what it looks like, you guys touched on praying together, reading the Bible together, and spending that time together. You talked about, and I had made a note on here. My note said, before you guys got up here, it said, allow them to be who God has called them to be together inside the family. And I'm glad you guys touched on not separating family from ministry, but making that a part of what our family is. What do we do as a family? We do ministry. That's what we do. That's part of our life. That's not an extra thing. It's never, oh, well, we got to go do this. Oh, I wish we didn't have to do that. It was, man, I can't believe that we get to go do this again. And, it's just amazing, and it's wonderful. And just like as you are married, If you are married, you have a plan. God has a plan for your life. And so in that plan that God has for your life, that you are walking that plan out. And then whomever and whatever God attaches to your life now becomes part of that plan. And so, as a parent, I don't have a plan for my life that is different than the plan for my children. My children, the plan that God has for their life, God has brought that into the plan that God has for me. And I have to recognize that so that I lead my family and so that I'm the dad, so that you're the mom that they need you to be, that will help them move through. Because as we're talking about understanding where our children are coming from, the enemy is on full-on attack. I mean, when you have kids games and then you have all of this, the ads and things like that pop up. And I'm not a big game player. I have a couple games on my phone, and I've never ever had an ad like that, really like a bad ad pop up. But it's not, I mean, I think they could be kids games. I know they're nothing like super, brainy or anything. They're just passing time when I'm sitting waiting on something. But the enemy is targeting our children, and he's targeting our children, and he's targeting our families. And he's trying to confuse them and tell them that what the Bible says about a family is not true, and that you can have two moms, you can have two dads, you can have all of this and everything. And so we have to understand that we have a lot of responsibility on that. Someone a moment ago talked about consistency. I had this written down. I know they were talking about being consistent, I think, in discipline, but I'll go a little bit further. Be consistent in everything. When it comes to living your life for the Lord. Our kids are watching us. They're watching everything. As a youth pastor for so many years, I had so many kids come to me and tell me that I don't even know what true Christianity is. I don't even know what it really means to be a Christian. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Your parents have been in church your whole life, and they're part of the leadership and all of that. And they look at me and say, yeah, but you don't understand. My parents are Christians when they're here, but they don't act the same way at home. And it affects our kids, right? And they're always watching, and they're always looking, and they're always soaking it in, and it's developing them. And I know we all would want the best education for our kids, right? So we do whatever we can do. Hey, do your homework. You got to do this. You got to do that. If you don't get a good grade, then you're in trouble. Then you're in all of those things. And so often, and I'm not saying this at us, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But in so many Christian households, the importance of our grades and everything, which are very, very important, but they outweigh everything. Everything else outweighs our relationship with God. When was the last time? And I know we're talking about elementary age kids, but just in case y'all don't know, they're trying to teach our elementary age kids that all of these things are acceptable, and that if you don't want to be a boy anymore, then you can change that, and you can be something else. And the enemy is working. I'm telling you, he is working overtime. And when was the last time that we sat down with one of our kids and had a serious talk about their relationship with God and where they were at? And what are you struggling with? What are you dealing with? What is it what's hard? And they're like, they're just kids. They don't have nothing. They're just kids. What do? They play. That's all they do. And but understand that in their development, that they are going through things that maybe we don't even know or realize that they're dealing with and that they're facing. And if we're not the ones speaking life into them, then the enemy is going to speak darkness into them. I don't want this, I don't want this to sound like a contradiction to what everyone has said, because they've used the word overwhelmed. And I had this word overwhelming with like my two handwritten asterisks beside it on each side, right? And I will say this, The devil is relentless in the attack on our kids and on our family. It's evident. And if we're going to be overwhelmed by things, and let's just be truthful, we are overwhelmed by things, whether it's our finances, whether it's our job, whether it's time, whether it's whatever the frustrations are. Maybe there's health issues. Maybe there's things that you really want to see happen and they're just not happening, and you get overwhelmed and we get anxious and we push in and push in and push in. But I'll just submit this to us tonight. If we're going to be overwhelmed by anything or with anything, be overwhelmed by the protection of your children and your family. If anything in the world is going to keep you up at night, let it be the protection of your children and your family. It is the one thing. It is the thing. The Bible talks about, what will it gain a man to profit the whole world and lose his own soul? What would it profit us, or what would we gain if we had everything in life but our family was not walking with the Lord? What if we had everything in life, but our children are so messed up just because we've neglected, and maybe not even on purpose, or I won't even say neglected, that sounds bad, but we haven't seen the necessity or the need to talk about the spiritual things. We'll wait till they're older. You ever seen a little kid like out of control when they're like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old? And you walk away and you're like, boy, I feel sorry for those parents when that little thing becomes a teenager, right? Because they're going to be out of control now. And somehow they're going to wind that back in. I mean, by the grace of God, I pray that they do. But the same thing is spiritually with our children. Again, the enemy is not waiting until they're older to try to cloud their mind and cause the confusion. And when they have those things in their mind, if they don't have that open door and that understanding that they can talk to you about anything because they're not going to be in trouble and it's okay, again, I know Angela said that's one of the things that we had. I had this in my home growing up. There was nothing in my house that was taboo. Nothing. We could talk about anything and everything. And now all of it was age appropriate. And it's really, really sad to say, but the age of appropriation, or however you'd say that, is so much lower now than it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there were certain things you didn't talk about. You didn't have to talk about, at least until middle school, right? And now there are things you better talk about. You better talk. I mean, it's just scary. And it makes it more difficult because how do I talk about it without putting something in their mind that is going to cause them to become curious, is going to cause them to begin to think about that. And I love the way it was explained by both tonight. And, by saturating that with the Word of God. And I don't believe that as we are understanding who our children are, giving them a list of rules of what not to do, but giving them an understanding of how much that God loves them. And then the demonstration through our life of how much that God loves them. And those hearing them pray and praying with them and letting them hear you pray and reading the Bible together and having a family devotion time. There is nothing in the world that can substitute that. We've heard that and talked about it. But the one thing that I want to encourage you, because you are developing human beings here, and we want to raise up godly young men and godly young ladies. And so we can pray, we can read, and we can have devotion. But if we're not living it in front of them, I don't want to say it's in vain, but it's losing the effectiveness of the one thing that they know, or the person or persons that they know who say that they are children of God. And so we again, going back, being consistent with all of those things. Your kids, right? You know this. They need you more than they know that they need you, and they love you more than sometimes they say that they love you. It's so funny. They sometimes can give such big attitudes for such little bodies, and they give all these big attitudes. And what would happen if you just said, okay, then this coming week, I need you to get your own dinner. I mean, not from my refrigerator either. You're just going to have to, I don't know what you're going to do, right? And I'm not saying that you do that and starve them but I don't think they would starve. But, it's some of the things that, but we have to understand, right? And I know that we do. And I guess it goes back to that consistency. When parents would come in and say, I don't know what I'm going to do with my kids, they're driving me crazy and they won't listen. This is the one thing I can tell you that will work, and it may take a little bit of time. Don't say anything you're not going to do. If you say it, do it. You don't know how many times Brenda got so mad at me because we'd be on our way somewhere as a family, and one of the boys would be acting up, and I would let it out, and I would say, if you do it again, I'm turning this car around. And I made our whole family suffer so many times, well, probably 3 or 4. Then I suffered when I got home, but about 3 or 4 times because I said something. And simply because I said it, now we got to do it. Because if I keep saying, if you do it again and we're turning around, we're going home, and then I don't turn around and go home, then they'll say, he's really not going to do it, so I'll keep pushing the envelope. Consistency and all of those things. And just as we talk about consistency in our disciplines, make sure we have consistency in our walk with God, that they see that in our life, and that they know that, and that we bring them along with us, and we pull them, and we get them to a place where we're no longer pulling them, but now they're running with us. And it's beautiful when we have a family that our kids recognize when we need prayer. That's amazing. When they recognize, and it's not because we're being mean or ugly, it's not because we're mad, but they just recognize that just like they need our prayer, that we need their prayer. And it's bringing them along with us. And understanding, because there will be signs in their life, and we all know them, right? We know, like, anybody having one of your kids, or maybe all of them, that if they're lying, you know they're lying, right? They do whatever, their eyes will cross or whatever it is, and they can't help it, Their ears start wiggling, whatever it is. I'm like, oh, yeah, please stop talking. You're getting in more trouble the more you talk. And right, there are things when we know they're searching for, and they're trying to, like, they don't want to lie, but they don't want to tell us the whole truth. And they're like, and this is the kid that runs their mouth all the time and never is a loss for words. And now they're trying to pick their words wisely. And you're like, okay, what are you doing? My 3 boys, grown men, and I still know over the phone, I can say something's going on. What is it? No, Dad, I'm good. I know you're good, but what is it? And eventually, if it's not on that phone call, it's in another one that they'll FaceTime. And I mean, sometimes they say, Dad, can you go to the room and talk? And of course, that drives Brenda crazy. And I said, yeah. And so I go in there, and they're like, are you by yourself? And then they'll start saying things that they're dealing with. And these are grown men, and they're just there, and they're bawling on the phone at FaceTime. And I'm looking at them and seeing how broken they are, because maybe it's something with their family that they're trying to get right, and they're, something with their kids that they're trying to get right, and just saying, Dad, what did you do when I did this? Well, you might go to jail now if you do what I did. No, I'm just kidding. And it was 2 kicks and a hi-ya, and that fixed everything, and stuff. But it's the things that they remember, and it brings them back to those moments. And so what we are doing now in all of those things are, it is a lifetime. These ages, these young ages, we are God is developing and what we put in. And I'll say this, and then I'll be done. Pastor Travis and Pastor Angela are sowing into our kids. But because they love them, and because they care about them, and because they pray for them every single day. I know that as a fact. I know that they care about them. I know that they love them. I know that they teach them the Word of God. It is not a substitute for us as parents. We should look at them and as they get older, look at Pastor Will and Pastor Kendra and say, what a great asset that God has put in. And so I hope that puts a fire in us to say, I need to, whatever I need to do. Maybe you're on that place and you just needed to have some affirmation tonight. Maybe you needed to be pushed a little further in or reminded, whatever it was. But you look at them and say, man, I've got such great folks that are pouring into my kid's life, and what I can pour into them and how I can live is so meaningful in what you guys do, not to lessen it at all, but it's like the icing on the top, right? It is that one thing that you're pouring into the kids and pouring into parents. So anyway, God bless you guys. Thank y'all. I'm good. I know how to get out of a chair.
Awesome. So I just, again, want to thank you so much for being here tonight. And this is something that we want to really partner with all of you. We don't want this to feel like this is a one-man band, or like is this just for your family or whatever. Like, we really want to partner with everyone together, because God's kingdom is more than just like you or your family, or it's all of us together. We're advancing together as a church and as a family, and so that's why we're here. We want to be with you. We want to partner with you. We want to do everything we can to help you. That's why we researched everything and talked about everything, and I had Pastor Chad and Pastor Lisa and Pastor David come up and share these things with you, because I know that there are things that are going to benefit y'all's lives, and even mine and Pastor Angela's, though we have no kids yet. Like, this is stuff that I'm going to take and practice, and as we grow and get ready to start a family, that these are things that we will implement in our own household. And so I really encourage you guys to continue to take everything that was spoken tonight, and if there were things that you missed, like I said, it's recorded. We'll get this out to you probably by next week. But really take hold of everything that was spoken today. And if you want more information, if you need more help, or if you want to ask, or you have more questions, you all have my number. You are more than welcome to contact me or Pastor Angela. I know Pastor Chad and Pastor Lisa would be willing to speak to you, and so would Pastor David and even Pastor Brenda. They would love to speak to you guys. And if there's anything that we could help you with, we're here for you, right? We're not just here for, okay, we're here on Sundays, we're here on Wednesdays, and that's it. We're here for every day of the week, Monday through Sunday, right? We're here all the time for you guys. And so something that I didn't say earlier was every Wednesday night we've been talking about teamwork with the kids too, and I've been relating it to how they can do it at home with their family and with their school. And so they themselves, every Wednesday night for the past month or little over a month, they've been hearing the same kind of things that, not to the full degree, but they've been talking about unity together in the family and in school and in everything, all of their relationships, and how to respect one another, how to respect the parents and work together. So this is something that we've been teaching the kids this whole month, and going to continue to do so for now until forever, right? So just know that we have been partnering with them too in there, teaching them that, hey, we have to listen and obey our parents as well. But again, I just thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I just want to pray that God would just bless us. So Lord, I thank you that God, for every family that was here, for every family that couldn't make it, God, I pray that as they hear this word back, God, Lord, that they would just be blessed, that they would be able to take the things that were spoken tonight, and that they would begin to implement them in their own household, that they would be made more knowledgeable, that they would be made more aware of the things that are going on within this world, and just how messed up everything has become. But Lord, that knowing that you are still God and that you are still good, and that as long as we are doing the things that you have called us to, God, that you will help lead us and guide us. And we have a support system here that is willing to come along with us and help guide the whole family, not just the individual, not just the parent, not just the child, but the family as a whole, guiding them to their relationship and helping them along their way with their relationship with you, Lord. And I just pray that you would just give everybody a fantastic night, and that you would just be with us this weekend, Lord. And I thank you for all that you have done, Lord. We love you and we thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.